If you're looking for a movie that is more complex than The Matrix, then Memento is the right movie for you. Its name aside, this movie has garnered thousands of fans, raising several questions at the same time. From its confusing beginning to its more confusing end, Memento has proven to be a masterpiece over the years. Join us today as we discover 20 weird facts you didn't know about the weird movie. Number 20, Memento was inspired by a short story. Behind every great movie is always the scriptwriter. Although the director helps in bringing the concept to life, the accolades go to the scriptwriter. In the case of Memento, the idea behind the script wasn't just conceived by one person. The idea was first developed by Christopher Nolan's brother, Jonathan Nolan, who wrote a short story called Memento Mori. This title translates to "Remember that you must die." Christopher Nolan then worked together with his brother to adapt the story into a screenplay. This decision happened during a cross-country road trip from Chicago to Los Angeles in July 1996. Christopher Nolan was relocating to the West Coast. On their way, Jonathan told his brother about the short story he was working on. Christopher was obviously impressed and showed interest in his brother's short story idea. After they got to Los Angeles, his brother Jonathan had to return to Washington, D.C. to finish college at Georgetown University. This university inspired a character in his short story, John G., who was an homage to Jonathan's Georgetown University screenwriting professor at the time, John Glavin. Christopher never forgot about his brother's idea. He was really interested, so he kept asking his brother to send him the first draft of the storyline. Jonathan refused at first, but finally complied after some months. 2 months after he sent the draft, Christopher, who must have thought hard about the story, felt telling the story backwards would be better. He then proceeded to write the script. Jonathan wasn't left behind, since the story was his idea from the beginning. They both worked on the script together. Jonathan focused on his short story while Christopher worked on the script. They sent subsequent revisions of their respective works to each other. Christopher initially wrote the script as a linear story, and then would go back and reorder it the way it is on screen to check the logic of it. Nolan was also influenced by the short story Funes the Memorious by Jorge Luis Borges. I think Memento is a strange cousin to Funes the Memorious, about a man who remembers everything, who can't forget anything. It's a bit of an inversion of that. When Jonathan was done with his short story was titled Memento Mori. Jonathan's work is radically different from Christopher's film, although it maintains the same essential elements. In Jonathan's short story, the protagonist is not Leonard but Earl, a man confined within the walls of a mental institution. Like Leonard, he is haunted by the violent death of his wife at the hands of an anonymous intruder. His wife's death was more than grief. It also shattered Earl's ability to form new long-term memories, trapping him in a perpetual present. To fight against this disorienting existence, Earl scrawls notes to himself and etches truths into his skin with tattoos, each mark a desperate anchor to reality. But while Leonard drifts in uncertainty, Earl pushes himself toward a single unwavering goal. Through his own carefully planted words, he convinced himself to escape confinement. The notes, once tools of remembrance, become a trail leading him out of the institution into the world beyond. But in the film's version of the story, there is no question about where this trail ends. Earl tracks down his wife's killer and exacts his vengeance. Number 19. The opening scene isn't as complex as it appears to be. When Memento was released, fans were instantly drawn to its opening scene. Seeing something like that was extraordinary, and it immediately sparked several questions and discussions online. Christopher Nolan's first shot at playing with time really sold off that he went ahead to make it a significant feature in his other movies like Inception, Dunkirk, and Tenet. According to fans, one of the most memorable scenes in the movie is its opening sequence. Just as Christopher suggested to his brother while they were writing the script, the film begins by playing backwards, as a Polaroid picture fades away and retreats into a camera. Next, blood is seen flowing back towards a corpse, followed by a bullet jumping back into Leonard's gun, and finally Teddy's glasses returning to his face. Teddy, once dead, is now seen alive and yelling at Leonard. Nobody had seen anything like that before. In fact, it was cited as the most challenging scene to film. However, the opening scene turned out not to be as complex as it appeared to be. A lot of viewers wouldn't notice anything about the sound effects in the opening scene. All the sounds heard in the beginning, except for the part when Teddy shouted, "No!" were actually played. It was only played backwards. Not all of the action was filmed in reverse. Some sequences were actually shot forward and then edited to appear otherwise. For instance, the part where the close-up of a bullet shell casing is seen skittering across the floor. To create the effect, a crew member got down on his hands and knees and blew the casing into the frame, giving the illusion that it was sliding backwards toward the gun it had just fired from. The problem was that the casing kept slipping out of view. In the confusion, the camera was mistakenly rigged to shoot backwards. The result was a strange image. Instead of a casing sliding back to its source, it looked like it was being sucked away from the gun. Christopher Nolan ultimately solved the problem in the edit suite. What appears on screen is a clever reversal of a forward-running practical effect, one that had been meant to look like a reversal from the start, but only worked all thanks to a happy accident. Number 18. Carrie-Anne Moss had a lot of competitors. The actress who starred as the duplicitous bartender, Natalie Carrie-Anne Moss, wasn't the first choice for that role. Christopher Nolan wasn't the type to put all his eggs into one basket, so other actresses like Ashley Judd, Famke Janssen, and future Mrs. Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, were considered at first for the role. However, Carrie-Anne Moss's previous performances on screen were just too good, and Nolan couldn't resist. After being impressed by Carrie-Anne Moss's performance as Trinity in the 1999 science fiction film The Matrix, Jennifer Todd suggested her for the part of Natalie. While Mary McCormack wanted the role, Nolan decided to cast Moss as Natalie, saying, "She added an enormous amount to the role of Natalie that wasn't on the page." Also, for the corrupt police officer Teddy, comedian Denis Leary was mentioned, though proved unavailable. Number 17. Guy Pearce really put in a lot of effort. The actor who appeared as Leonard Shelby, the protagonist of the movie who had amnesia, really put in a lot of effort into his character. Guy Pearce had to undergo a rigorous preparation process to capture a man struggling with memory loss. That wouldn't have been easy and might have affected the actor's mental state. "I'm having an existential crisis," Guy Pearce admitted in his role in Memento. "I watched Memento the other day and I'm still depressed. I'm *T in that movie. I'd never thought that before, but I did this Q&A of Memento earlier this month and decided to actually watch the film again. But while it was playing, I realized I hate what I did," he added. "And so all this stuff about an exec at Warner's being why I've not worked with Chris again, it came crashing down. I know why I didn't work with Chris again. It's because I'm no good in Memento." Although the world and fans thought otherwise, the actor who played the protagonist himself wasn't proud of his role, even if he did put in all his effort. Number 16. Carrie-Anne Moss recommended her friend for a role. In the movie world, stars like Carrie-Anne Moss have proven to us that friends can always look out for each other, no matter the field they find themselves in. Teddy, who was the antagonist in the movie, a corrupt police officer who uses the disability of Leonard to his own murderous advantage, was played by Joe Pantoliano. Joe Pantoliano wasn't brought on board like other cast members. He was actually recommended for the role. His friend Carrie-Anne Moss suggested his name to Christopher Nolan. The two of them became friends when they both worked together on The Matrix. After Joe Pantoliano was recommended, he met Christopher Nolan for the first time at a coffee shop on Beverly Boulevard. According to Pantoliano, Nolan was polite and intelligent, even if he deduced that he wasn't his initial choice. "I called my agent. I said, I'm positive I'm not this guy's first choice, so just FYI, we won't get the offer," Pantoliano recalls. According to the cast choice list, Denis Leary was actually the first choice for the role of Teddy, but the actor rejected it. Thanks to him, Pantoliano was offered the role a few weeks later. According to Pantoliano, the cast and crew would gather at his house in Santa Monica during the weekends for rehearsals. He, along with Christopher Nolan, Guy Pearce, and Emma Thomas, spent several hours in his garage refining the dialogue to sound more American. When it came to shooting, Christopher Nolan took it personally upon himself to coach Pantoliano through Teddy's headspace from scene to scene. "Am I telling the truth? Am I lying? What is happening at this moment?" recalls Pantoliano. "Once he gave me my marching orders, I played from there." Number 15. Teddy's phone number is the same as Marla's from Fight Club. In the movie, there is a scene where Teddy gives Leonard his phone number, which is 555-0134. As strange as this fact may sound, it is actually true. That number is the same number that Marla gives to the narrator in Fight Club. The movie came out a year before Memento. It is difficult to determine whether it was a pure coincidence or if it was intentionally taken from the film. We can never say. Number 14. The movie had black and white segments. The black and white sequences in Memento are another feature that makes the movie unique. The impressive thing about this sequence is that the black and white segments were interwoven with colored scenes. These monochrome segments depict events in chronological order, offering glimpses into the story's progression. Stefano Ghislati wrote an article in Film Anthology on how Christopher Nolan provides the viewer with necessary clues to decode the plot as they watch. These clues also help them understand the chronology. According to him, the color sequences include a brief overlap to help clue the audience into the fact that they are being presented in reverse order. The purpose of the fragmented reverse sequencing is to force the audience into a sympathetic experience of Leonard's defective ability to create new, long-term memories, where prior events are not recalled, since the audience has yet to see them. Polaroid pictures also play an essential role in the movie. In one scene in the film, Leonard uses instant photos as a method to remember faces, places, and key details, compensating for his inability to retain memories. Number 13. The tattoo parlor is named after Nolan's wife. In the movie, there is a tattoo shop that Leonard visits. The name of that shop is Emma's Tattoo. The unusual aspect of this shop's name is that it was named after Emma Thomas. Emma Thomas worked closely with Christopher Nolan during production, and they later dated before she finally became his wife. Emma Thomas worked as an associate producer on Memento and has been cited as a vital part of the movie. Emma Thomas showed the script Christopher Nolan wrote to Aaron Ryder, an executive for Newmarket Films, in 1997. According to Ryder, the script was perhaps the most innovative script he had ever seen. Newmarket then made it an option with a budget of $4.5 million. The couple both met at University College London when Christopher was 19. Since then, Emma Thomas has worked by his side as the producer of all his films since 1997. They both worked on Insomnia, The Dark Knight Trilogy, The Prestige, Inception, and Interstellar. The couple has 4 children and resides in Los Angeles. Number 12. The cinematographers chosen by Nolan rejected the script. When Christopher Nolan wanted to choose a cinematographer for Memento, his first choice was Peter Deming. Unfortunately for Christopher Nolan, Peter Deming couldn't take the offer because he had just signed up to shoot Scream 3. Christopher Nolan then tried Mark Vargo, but he refused because he couldn't make any sense of the movie's script. The cinematographer for Memento, Wally Pfister, worked with Christopher Nolan for the first time, and after that, he became Nolan's regular cinematographer for his subsequent films. Number 11. Joe Pantoliano had to improvise in a few scenes. There were a few scenes in the movie that Joe Pantoliano improvised. There was a particular scene that Pantoliano suggested, which was when he sees Teddy waiting in Leonard's car without Leonard knowing. When Leonard gets in, he is understandably startled. Though small, the scene carries weight. It hints at a wider world operating beyond Leonard's fragile perception, intensifying both the unsettling nature of his amnesia and the sense that Teddy is far more slippery than he appears. He also improvised the black and white sequences, where Guy Pearce reportedly had significant freedom to explore Leonard's inner state. One of Joe Pantoliano's clever contributions was the detail of Leonard writing, "Don't trust her," in handwriting different from his usual style. The choice was deliberate. It ensured Leonard would later recognize the inconsistency and know to scratch the note out, since it wasn't a genuine reminder but a planted suggestion. Number 10. Guy Pearce had a lot of competitors. Aside from Joe Pantoliano and Carrie-Anne Moss, Guy Pearce also wasn't the first choice of Christopher Nolan. Before Guy Pearce was cast as Leonard in Memento, Christopher Nolan had his eyes on a famous star. Brad Pitt was reportedly very interested in the script. However, scheduling conflicts, possibly related to the release of Fight Club the year before, ultimately prevented him from taking on the role. At the time, Christopher Nolan was out of ideas on who he wanted to cast for the role. He wasn't really popular in the industry, so it was difficult for him to pull higher strings. His first movie was shot on weekends in London over the course of a year. and had made a modest splash on the festival circuit, most notably at Slamdance, but it hadn't established him in Hollywood. What Christopher Nolan did have, however, was Pitt's attention. Truthfully, he did read the script, Nolan later explained at Slamdance. He met with me about it when he didn't have any reason to know who I was or anything about it, and nothing came of it, other than him being interested in it. I think within the talent agency world where the script was circulating, it just sort of perked up a bit of interest in what was a very obscure project otherwise. And I think really that's how it came to Guy Pearce's attention, and he sort of got the ball rolling. In other words, Pitt's fleeting interest may have been the spark that got Memento made. His name lent legitimacy to a script that otherwise might have been ignored, nudging the project into the right hands. Guy Pearce, of course, ultimately made the role of Leonard unforgettable. Aside from Brad Pitt, there were several others, including Aaron Eckhart, who would later work with Nolan as Harvey Dent Two-Face in The Dark Knight 8 years later. So in a strange twist of Hollywood fortune, we have Brad Pitt's almost involvement to thank for setting Memento on the path to becoming the breakthrough film that launched Christopher Nolan's career. Number 9. Stephen Tobolowsky really had amnesia in the past. Although Stephen Tobolowsky's performance as Sammy Jankis in Memento carries a strange authenticity, it was for good reason. Years before the film, Tobolowsky himself had an encounter with anterograde amnesia. After undergoing surgery for kidney stones, he was given an experimental substance instead of a traditional anesthetic. The substance allowed his body to function normally but left him without the ability to form new memories. Even after the procedure, the effects lingered. "I would still have instances where I was born in that moment," he later recalled, "not knowing where I was or what I was doing." It was a far milder case than the devastating condition Jankis endures in the film, but the experience left its mark. When Tobolowsky read Christopher Nolan's script, which he called the best I've ever read, he knew he could bring something unique to the role. Meeting with Nolan, he focused on the fact that his real-life perspective on memory loss was something no other actor could provide. Christopher Nolan agreed, encouraging him to improvise during the black and white segments that explore Jankis's condition. "Part of my brain had to remember what it was doing, and another part had not to remember what I was doing," Tobolowsky later told the AV Club, adding that Sammy Jankis was certainly the most difficult thing that I'd ever done. That improvisational freedom led to one of the film's most memorable lines, "Test this, you F*** king quack," a spur-of-the-moment outburst that went on to become one of Memento's most quotable pieces of dialogue. Looking back, Tobolowsky admits the role was a challenge, as it forced him to relive his own disorienting experience with memory loss. Yet that authenticity is precisely what makes his performance so haunting. In a film obsessed with the fragility of memory, it's fitting that one of its most indelible characters was brought to life by someone who had truly lived it. Number 8. The tattoo's significance. One thing that makes the movie strange is the several tattoos on Leonard's body. Mere looking at the movie's cover, one would think the protagonist is a gangster. But those tattoos each had a role to play. They were his memory aids, and they guided him through his revenge journey. Each of them represented a clue or an essential piece of information. At the end of the movie, Leonard burns the photograph of the dead Jimmy after Teddy confesses to his crimes. He burns the photograph together with the photo of himself right after killing the real attacker a year ago, pointing to his chest where he would get a tattoo to document his successful revenge. In a monologue, Leonard explains that he is willing to lie to himself to get justice against anyone who has wronged him. He therefore targets Teddy by ordering a tattoo of Teddy's license plate number and writing a note to himself that Teddy is not to be trusted, so that he will mistake Teddy for John G. and kill him. Number 7. The movie's soundtrack also played a role in its success. Another significant feature in the movie is the soundtrack played throughout. Composer David Julian's haunting score is one of the key elements that give Memento its unnerving atmosphere. Inspired by synthesized soundtracks such as Vangelis's Blade Runner and Hans Zimmer's The Thin Red Line, Julian crafted a soundscape that is as fractured and uneasy as Leonard's own memory. He deliberately created two distinct sonic worlds to mirror the film's shifting timelines. The color sequences are underscored with brooding and classical themes, while the black and white scenes are marked by oppressive, rumbly noise, reflecting their starkness and disorientation. David Julian ultimately considered the entire score to be Leonard's theme, channeling the protagonist's fractured psychology through sound. "The emotion I was aiming at with my music was yearning and loss," he explained. "But a sense of loss you feel, but at the same time you don't know what it is you have lost, a sense of being adrift." The result of his work and expertise is a score that doesn't just accompany the film, but actively deepens its impact, immersing the audience in the same sense of confusion, unease, and longing that defines Leonard's journey. Number 6. Memento has an unintentional foreshadowing Easter egg. One of Memento's strangest little Easter eggs, almost certainly accidental, seems oddly prophetic in hindsight. In a fleeting moment during one of Leonard's many driving scenes, the camera catches a shop window plastered with familiar logos. Among them are none other than the iconic emblems of Batman and Superman. At the time, this was nothing more than background dressing, likely beyond Christopher Nolan's control. But with hindsight, it feels like a spooky bit of foreshadowing. Years later, Nolan would famously direct the Dark Knight trilogy for Warner Brothers, then remain in the DC orbit as executive producer on Man of Steel and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Of course, the same window also displays logos for Pokémon, WWF Wrestling, and even Star Wars merchandise, so it's safe to say that Nolan wasn't secretly teasing his entire future filmography. Still, the quick glimpse of DC's two most legendary superheroes tucked inside his breakout thriller stands as a fun, little-known detail. Long before Batman Begins, it turns out Christopher Nolan had already brushed against the world of Gotham and Metropolis. Number 5. It took a short time to film Memento. Christopher Nolan's breakthrough film, Memento, with its famously tangled timelines, was made under remarkably tight conditions. The entire shoot lasted just 25 days. Isn't that difficult to believe? The shoot lasted from September 7 to October 8, 1999. Out of the cast, only Guy Pearce was required on set every single day, while the others worked far less. For instance, Carrie-Anne wrapped all her scenes within a single week and only shared one day of filming with her Matrix co-star and friend Joe Pantoliano. The very first day, when they shot the exterior scenes outside Natalie's house, this schedule had placed an enormous pressure on Guy Pearce, who had to shoulder the film's momentum and consistency almost entirely on his own. If his performance faltered, the whole movie would have been in jeopardy. Most of the production was shot on location, adding to the film's raw, grounded feel. The Travel Inn in Tujunga, California doubled as the discount inn where Leonard stays, while the derelict building used for the climactic confrontation between Leonard, Teddy, and Jimmy was one of the few constructed sets. The speed and efficiency of the shoot highlight an important truth. You don't need a sprawling schedule or elaborate sets to make a masterpiece. Sometimes a lean production, the right locations, and a committed lead performance are more than enough. Number 4. Memento was a box office success. Despite its complex plot and its non-linear narrative, Memento strangely garnered a lot of fans worldwide. The film's success at the box office reflected the public's appreciation for its unique storytelling approach. After the first few weeks of distribution, Memento had surprisingly reached more than 500 theaters and earned a domestic total of $25 million in its box office run. The film's success came as a shock to those who passed on the film, so much so that Weinstein realized his mistake and tried to buy the movie from Newmarket. Number 3. Christopher Nolan put his best into the movie's production. Although Memento is often described as a non-linear story, Christopher Nolan insists that calling it a non-linear story wasn't quite right. Structurally, he argues that the film is entirely linear. According to him, what makes it feel unusual is the way it mirrors Leonard's fractured perspective. Christopher Nolan designed the experience so the audience would share in Leonard's disorientation, using both narrative structure and camera techniques to achieve that effect. As Nolan explained to Elvis Mitchell, many scenes begin exactly as they do for Leonard, in the middle of something, with no context, forcing the viewer to share his confusion about what came before. The visual style reinforced this sense of immediacy. Speaking to the BBC, Nolan revealed that he shot the film in scope with anamorphic lenses to give the most transparent, most immersive image possible. He deliberately avoided wide shots, long shots, and especially establishing shots, creating a sense of intimacy and unease. Once you start playing with the landscape, you feel a lot of texture and a lot of intimacy, he said, describing how the framing kept the audience locked inside Leonard's head. Even after production, Nolan's meticulous attention to detail shaped the film's impact. In one scene, Teddy snaps at Leonard, "You don't have a clue, you freak." But when Nolan reviewed the footage in the editing room, he decided he didn't like how the words "you freak" sounded. His solution was unusual. He dubbed those two words himself, seamlessly blending his voice with Joe Pantoliano's performance. These subtle creative choices, from the lenses to the editing tweaks, demonstrate just how carefully Nolan constructed Memento to make the audience experience memory and its failures exactly as Leonard does. Number 2. As confusing as it was, Memento was called a masterpiece. To the shock of those who either refused to star in the movie or those who rejected one role or the other, Memento became a huge success even years after its release. Christopher Nolan's mind-bending thriller not only captivated audiences with its fractured storytelling, but also inspired countless filmmakers to push beyond conventional narrative boundaries. Its layered structure, enigmatic clues, and haunting themes continue to mesmerize viewers, securing its reputation as a modern classic. That reputation was formally recognized in 2017 when the Library of Congress added Memento to the National Film Registry. Chosen as one of just 25 films that year for preservation as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, it earned a unique distinction: the very first narrative feature from the 21st century to be included. Although the registry began accepting 21st century films in 2010, only documentaries had been selected before Memento. Since then, several other narrative films have joined the list, including Christopher Nolan's own The Dark Knight in 2020. Beyond critical recognition, Memento was also a commercial success, grossing $40 million on a $9 million budget and quickly developing a devoted cult following. It garnered major accolades along the way, winning the Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award at Sundance and earning 2 Academy Award nominations for Best Original Screenplay and Best Film Editing. It is also evident that Memento was not only Christopher Nolan's career breakthrough, but also a landmark in 21st century cinema. By daring to tell its story in such an unconventional way, the film secured both its place in movie history and its preservation for generations to come. Number 1. Memento had a very strange end. Memento's non-linear narrative is presented as 2 different sequences of scenes interspersed during the film, a series in black and white that is shown chronologically, and a series of color sequences shown in reverse order that shows the audience the mental state of the protagonist. The 2 sequences converge at the end of the film, resulting in a complete and cohesive narrative. Aside from its strange and unique opening scene, the film's conclusion also leaves audiences contemplating its ambiguous nature, sparking debates and theories about the protagonist's ultimate fate and the truth behind his quest. The film is structured with 2 timelines. Color sequences are alternated with black and white sequences. The latter are put together in chronological order. The color ones are ordered in reverse. Chronologically, the black and white sequences come first, and the color sequences come next. Andy Klein suggested a numbering scheme. This numbering scheme was taken from number 1 to 22 for the black and white sequences and letters A to V for the color ones in his article for Salon magazine. The plotting of the film as presented is opening credits, shown backward, 1, V, 2, U3, T4, S, down to 22, A credits. One of Memento's most striking formal tricks also comes in the seamless transition from black and white sequence 22 into color sequence A, timed with the development of a Polaroid photograph. This pivotal moment merges the 2 timelines, solidifying the story's narrative. For fans eager to experience the film in chronological order, Nolan included it as a hidden feature on the 2-disc limited edition Region 1 DVD and the 3-disc special edition Region 2 release. In this version, the story unfolds in sequence, beginning with the reversed end credits, moving through chapters 1 to 22/A, then continuing B through V, and finally closing with the opening titles, this time running forward instead of backward. The film's innovative spirit extended to its marketing. Jonathan Nolan designed the official website, taking a page from the viral strategy used by the Blair Witch Project. Rather than a straightforward promotion, the site offered cryptic clues, a newspaper clipping about Teddy's murder, clickable words that revealed Leonard's notes, photographs, and even fabricated police reports. The campaign went further, mailing out Polaroids of a bloodied, shirtless Leonard, pointing to an empty spot on his chest and a strange teaser that hinted at the film's mystery without giving anything away. Because distributor Newmarket Films handled the release themselves, Christopher Nolan even cut the trailers personally. They were sold inexpensively to cable outlets like Bravo and A&E, as well as platforms such as Yahoo and MSN. Those trailers played a crucial role in building buzz and drawing audiences to a film that might have otherwise slipped under the radar. Which of these facts shocked you the most? Was Guy Pearce right to have publicly said that about the movie that became so successful? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more interesting content.